Before we begin, you already know the deal. Hit that subscribe button if you dare step deeper into the dark corners of the world's most dangerous minds. Now, let's get into it. The sirens over Florence, Colorado, weren't supposed to sound that night. Not here. Not outside the most secure federal prison in America, ADX Florence. The place designed so no one escapes, no one speaks, and no one leaves without a shadow permanently burned into their soul. Yet at 3:14 a.m., the silence over the high desert snapped like a brittle bone. A prison transport van. Overturned. Blood on the asphalt. One guard missing. And the man they were transporting, a man the Bureau of Prisons claimed was impossible to move without 9 layers of security, had vanished. His name was Marcus Vega. To the public, he was an obscure figure, a former logistics consultant convicted of orchestrating a series of robberies that left 3 armored truck guards dead. To those who investigate him, he was something far more dangerous, a disciplined, calculating mind who built a criminal network with the same precision he once used to optimize supply chains. But what made Vega truly terrifying was a thing that no investigator could ever quite prove: the belief that he'd never actually gotten caught. He'd simply allowed himself to be arrested, and now he was gone. The first on scene was Deputy Marshal Olivia Hart. Her SUV skidded to a stop on Highway 67, gravel spraying as she leapt out with her weapon drawn. The desert wind carried a metallic scent, not just blood, but something else, something colder, a message. The transport van lay twisted on its side, headlights flickering like dying eyes. The guard in the passenger seat was alive, but barely. Broken ribs, shattered wrists, blood running down his face in thin, dark rivers. "Hart," he croaked, recognizing her despite the blur. It wasn't an ambush. She crouched beside him, already checking for pulse points and wounds. "What do you mean? Did someone ram you?" His eyes rolled, struggling to focus. He did it himself. Hart froze. Vega caused the crash? Unlocked his restraint somehow. I don't know how. One minute he was quiet. The next, God! He grabbed the wheel. The van flipped. I woke up and he was gone. Just gone. Hart stared at him, her jaw tightening. Men like Vega didn't just go. They vanished with purpose. For minutes later, backup arrived. 2 state troopers, BOP personnel, and Hart's partner, Special Agent Drew Keller, a brilliant analyst with the people skills of a broken vending machine. He approached the scene with a flashlight in one hand and a folder tucked under his arm. His expression told her he already knew she wasn't going to like what he'd found. "Olivia." His voice was low. "You need to see this." He handed her a photo, grainy surveillance footage from inside ADX Florence. It showed Vega, shackled, being escorted to the transport bay hours earlier. But it wasn't the escort she focused on. It was his face. No panic. No confusion. He was smiling. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," she muttered. "Oh, it definitely is," Keller replied. That's a man who knew exactly what was coming. Hart let out a slow, careful breath as her eyes shifted to the desert beyond the crash site. Rocky terrain. Sparse shrubs. Miles of nothing. He could be anywhere. The search began immediately. Helicopters swept the region with thermal imaging. Roadblocks were set up as far as Colorado Springs. 9 units combed the ground, though the cold desert air made scent tracking difficult. But what terrified Hart most wasn't that they couldn't find him. It was that the area around the crash showed no signs of a struggle. No footprints. No tire tracks. No blood trail. If he'd walked away, he'd walked lightly. Too lightly. As dawn broke, the pale orange light washed over the desert, revealing something Hart's flashlight hadn't picked up earlier, a glint of metal caught in a patch of sagebrush 20 feet from a road. She moved toward it cautiously. Keller followed. It was a small object, too small to be anything from the van. A key, a prison-grade handcuff key, except it wasn't BOP issued. It was custom-made, and Vega hadn't had visitors in months. Keller's voice dropped. Someone gave this to him. Someone inside. Hart pocketed the key. This wasn't an escape, she whispered. It was an extraction, and someone had helped him do it. By noon, The desert search grid doubled in size. Drones were deployed. Local ranchers interrogated. Still nothing. The longer Vega remained unfound, the clearer it became that the escape wasn't impulsive. It was planned down to the second. At 12:47 p.m., Hart received a call that made her stomach turn. A body had been found, a mile from the crash. She and Keller rushed to the location, a shallow gully carved into the earth. A forensic team stood silently around a corpse sprawled face down in the dust. When the body was turned over, Hart immediately recognized the uniform, the missing guard, the same guard who had signed the final transfer approval for Vega. But it wasn't the cause of death that chilled her. A precise stab wound beneath the jaw, severing the carotid artery. It was what had been carved into the man's forearm. 2 letters. XF. Keller spoke first. What the hell does that mean? Hart didn't answer. She knew exactly what it meant. ADX Florence, the prison's official code. Except this wasn't a message about the prison. It was a message about who controlled it. Later that afternoon, Hart and Keller returned to ADX Florence under heavy escort. The prison loomed like a concrete monolith, its gray walls swallowing sunlight. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Thick layers of silence cut only by distant metallic clicks and the echo of boots on polished floors. Warden Rayburn met them in the administrative wing. Every muscle in his face twitched with restrained panic. "You're not here to tour," he said through clenched teeth. "You're here to blame." "We're here to investigate," Hart corrected, "and we need everything. Full inmate movement logs, staff rotations, surveillance of the last 72 hours, including blind spots." "There are no blind spots," Rayburn snapped. Keller raised an eyebrow. "Warden, with all due respect, every institution has blind spots. The smart ones hide them. The dangerous ones create them." Rayburn didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was already leaking from his silence. As they walked deeper into the administrative corridor, Hart couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Not by prisoners, but by something more unsettling. Something structural, institutional. ADX Florence felt alive. And it felt like it was hiding something. The surveillance review room was dimly lit, rows of monitors casting a cold glow across the walls. Hart and Keller sifted through hours of footage, cross-referencing timestamps with staff check-ins. At 5:22 p.m., Keller froze the screen. "Olivia, look at this." A figure, guard uniform, cap pulled low, walking into the transport bay minutes before Vega was escorted out. The guard never spoke, never interacted, just stood near the vehicle, gloved hands moving with deliberate precision near the rear door. "Is that a second guard?" Keller asked. "No," Hart whispered. "Look closer." The way the figure moved, the way he positioned himself, subtle, fluid, intentional. He wasn't a guard. He was someone posing as one. And more importantly, he left something inside the van. Rewinding the footage frame by frame, they caught the glint of metal, the same type of key Hart had found in the sagebrush. The room went deathly silent. Keller swallowed. Someone infiltrated ADX Florence? That's not possible. You don't just walk into the most secure prison in America. "No," Hart said. "Not unless someone opens a door." She pressed her fingers against the monitor, tracing the outline of the disguised figure. He never looked at the camera. Not once. Not until the final second before he disappeared out of frame. Then, for a fraction of a heartbeat, he turned his head, just enough for the camera to catch the lower half of his face. A scar, thin and pale, running from the corner of his mouth to his chin. Keller leaned closer. "Do we know him?" Hart didn't answer. Her pulse had gone cold. She knew the scar. She knew it too well. It belonged to a man she'd spent 3 years hunting. A man believed to be dead. A man connected to Marcus Vega long before Vega ever stood trial. A ghost. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "No way. That's impossible." Keller frowned. "Who is he?" Hart stepped back, heart pounding. "His name was Daniel Kress. He died in a safe house fire 18 months ago." Keller stared at the screen. "Then someone lied." Hart nodded slowly. "Or someone brought him back." That was when the intercom crackled, followed by a frantic shout. "Warden Rayburn to Control Center. Now. You need to see this." Hart and Keller exchanged a look and ran. They reached the control center just as a technician replayed a live feed from the prison's perimeter cameras, recorded only 5 minutes earlier. A figure walking along the outer fence line. Calm, steady, and unmistakable. Marcus Vega. Except he wasn't escaping. He was coming back. And what he dropped beneath the camera, a small, dark object glinting in the dirt, froze the room like ice. Hart leaned in as the camera zoomed. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a note. It was something infinitely worse. His inmate ID tag, with one word etched into the back. "Begin." Hart felt her stomach drop. "He's not running," she whispered. "He's starting something." And then the alarms erupted throughout ADX Florence, louder and more chaotic than anything before. Because in that exact moment, for cell doors opened simultaneously on C-tier. For inmates stepped out. For the most dangerous men in federal custody. Released without explanation. Keller turned pale. "Olivia, this is an escape." Hart's voice trembled. "It's a takeover." And when the security team opened the locked basement door beneath the control room to investigate the cause of the malfunction, what they found inside changed everything. The basement beneath ADX Florence wasn't supposed to exist, at least not on any blueprint the Bureau of Prisons admitted to. Yet the steel door groaned open like some ancient vault, unleashing a gust of stale, cold air. Hart, Keller, and 2 tactical officers descended the concrete steps with weapons raised. Flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing a long corridor lined with pipes and wiring conduits. But this wasn't an ordinary utility tunnel. Someone had been down here recently. Someone had turned it into a command center. The first thing Hart noticed was the smell, oil, sweat, and something faintly chemical. The second was the table. A steel workbench covered in maps, schematics, and broken pieces of surveillance equipment. At the center lay an old laptop, screen cracked, still humming. Keller's light drifted to the wall. "Olivia, look at this." Pinned to the concrete were photographs. Not random, not chaotic, organized, systematic. Each one connected by red string. The guards, the warden, the transport route, her. A photo of her walking into the Denver Federal Building last month, coffee in hand, unaware she was being watched. Hart's chest tightened. "He's been building this longer than we thought." "He?" Keller asked. "No," she corrected. "They." Her eyes drifted to the far corner of the room, where a corkboard displayed a web of names. Some crossed out, some circled, some connected to Vega with lines like a spider's trap. And there, dead center, was the name she feared most. Daniel Kress. Keller let out a breath. If Kress is alive, that means this whole thing started long before Vega's arrest. Hart finished. But the question that rattled in her skull was far more dangerous. Why resurface now? A flicker from the laptop caught Keller's attention. He stepped closer and pulled a USB drive from the side. It was engraved with a small symbol, a half circle intersected by a vertical slash. Hart recognized it. Kress's signature mark. She slid the drive into an evidence bag, but before she could step back, the laptop screen flashed white. Lines of code raced across it, then resolved into a single message. A live feed, a cell block. Satir. The 4 inmates Vega had released were standing in a perfect line, facing the camera. Silent, unmoving, as if waiting for instructions. Then a voice crackled over the underscore feed. Deep, measured, unmistakable. Olivia Hart. Hart froze. Keller's flashlight trembled slightly. The voice continued, calm as a surgeon's hands. "If you found this room, then you finally understand. None of this is chaos. None of this is escape. It's correction. Correction." Kress used to say that word during interrogations, back when he was running logistics for one of the most disciplined criminal factions in the country. He believed institutions were fragile, that a single pressure point could break an empire. "The prison will fall," the voice said, "not from the outside, from the inside, and you will watch it happen." The feed cut to black. Keller turned to Hart. This is coordinated. He's playing with us. No, Hart said. He's warning us. Why warn us? Her answer was immediate. Because we're not the target. Upstairs, ADX Florence was descending into calculated chaos. Sirens blared. Red lights strobed along the walls. Staff sprinted to their emergency stations as lockdown protocols triggered, but the system was glitching, malfunctioning in bursts. A door locking, then unlocking, lights flickering, cameras dying. Someone was controlling the prison from somewhere they shouldn't have been able to reach. And if Crest had been inside ADX at any point, he'd hidden himself well. Hart and Keller pushed into the command center. Warden Rayburn spun toward them, sweat dripping down his temple. What did you find? A war room, Hart replied, built beneath your feet. Rayburn's face went pale. That's impossible. The basement was sealed 2 decades ago. Sealed, Keller repeated. Not empty. A tech analyst approached them, trembling slightly. Ma'am, we isolated the 4 cell doors that opened. They weren't hacked remotely. Someone accessed the internal wiring. How recently? Hart asked. Within the last 30 minutes. Keller exhaled, meaning the saboteur is still inside the prison. Rayburn slammed his fist into the console. Who? A guard? A contractor? An inmate? Hart didn't hesitate. Someone masquerading as one of those. Someone who already walked through your blind spots once. The scarred face flashed in her mind. Daniel Crest had always been meticulous. If he was orchestrating this, he wouldn't rely on Vega alone. He'd use Vega as a decoy, a catalyst to draw eyes away from the real objective. But what was the objective? A text shouted across the room. Warden, movement in the North Maintenance Corridor, unauthorized. Hart and Keller were already running before Rayburn gave the order. The corridor was dim, lit by emergency strips that cast long shadows on the walls. Hart's footsteps echoed sharply as she rounded a corner and stopped dead. A door was open. A door that should have required 2 levels of clearance. Inside, a panel hung loose, wires spilling like veins. Keller crouched beside them. Someone disabled the internal override. Hart looked past him, to the man lying on the floor. A guard, unconscious, pulse weak, not killed, spared. She swallowed. Crest doesn't kill unless he needs to. Keller nodded, meaning this guy saw something he shouldn't have. Vega, maybe. Hart pivoted toward the adjoining tunnel. A long stretch with pipes overhead, and the hum of ventilation vibrating through the walls. A perfect escape route. A perfect ambush. She stepped forward cautiously. Olivia, Keller whispered. We need backup. No time. And she was right, because halfway down the tunnel, she spotted it. Footprints. Fresh. Leading deeper. The air grew colder as they descended. The tunnel narrowing, claustrophobic. Pipes dripped condensation. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead like dying stars. Then voices. Low. Male. 2 of them. Hart motioned for silence and crept forward. She could see them now. 2 inmates from C-tier, armed with makeshift shanks, standing guard outside a sealed metal hatch embedded in the wall. Something that looked far more industrial than the prison blueprint suggested. What is that? Keller whispered. Hart didn't answer. Her pulse thrummed, because she knew exactly what it was. A delivery hatch. Not for food. For transfers. Prison to transport. A hidden route used decades ago before the prison modernized. A route that bypassed the main gates entirely. A way out. Vega wasn't escaping through the desert. He was walking out through the bones of the prison. Hart raised her weapon. But before she could act, a metallic bang erupted behind her. Pipes rattled. Lights snapped off. The tunnel plunged into darkness. A voice echoed through the black. You're late, Olivia. Her stomach tightened. Crest. She turned toward the sound. A whisper slid past her ear, though she felt no breath behind it. This isn't about Vega. A second whisper, this time on her left. It's about who he leads you to. Then the lights flickered back on. The tunnel was empty. The guards were unconscious on the ground. And the hatch was wide open. Vega was gone. Escaped, but not running. He had direction. He had purpose. And on the floor, left behind like a quiet provocation, was a small leather folder. Keller picked it up with gloved hands, opened it, and went still. Inside were photographs. Young men in military uniforms. Old case files stamped classified. And a single line written across the cover. The ones you missed. Hart's entire body went numb. Crest wasn't just breaking Vega out. He was unburying something. Something Hart had once investigated. Something the government had sealed. Something that had never truly died. And Vega was leading them straight into it. Snow fell over the Rockies and thinned, ghost-like sheets as Hart and Keller raced along the mountain road. Tires grinding against the frozen gravel. Vega had been gone less than an hour, but in that hour, he'd vanish again, this time through a route no modern prison official even knew existed. But Hart knew exactly where he was going. Crest had left her the folder for a reason, not to taunt her, to warn her, to steer her. The thick forest swallowed the headlights as they turned onto an abandoned service road that once serviced military convoys decades earlier. The air tasted metallic, like the cold was trying to bury secrets with ice. Keller clutched the folder in his hands, flipping through the old photographs. These guys are soldiers. Covert ops. Disavowed. Hart nodded grimly. Project Helios. Keller looked at her sharply. That myth? The group the Pentagon swears never existed. It existed, she said. And Vega was never a logistics consultant. He was one of them. The silence that followed was suffocating. Project Helios had been a covert operation that used ex-military assets to run infiltration and extraction missions in foreign territories. A program so deniable that its own operatives were burned the moment funding shifted. They were ghosts, unclaimed, unaccounted for. Hart had tried to investigate the program years ago. Files were redacted, witnesses evaporated, and those who talked, dead. All except one, Daniel Crest. Keller turned another page and froze. Olivia, this picture. That's Vega. Younger, leaner, wearing the same cold, calculating stare he had the night of the transport crash. And these men, Keller continued, pointing to the other faces, all confirmed Kia. Hart shook her head. That's the problem. They never confirmed the bodies. They just closed the files. And now Crest is bringing them back. Hart's foot pressed harder on the accelerator. A half-mile ahead, something flickered between the pines. Faint lights, shifting shadows. A structure emerged from the darkness. A derelict military bunker, half consumed by earth. Concrete cracked and overgrown with frostbitten weeds. But faint warmth emitted from its seams. Someone was inside. Hart killed the engine. The silence that followed was total. A vacuum pressed against the world. She stepped out, drew her weapon, and felt the night grip her like a cold hand. "We go slow," she whispered. They advanced. The bunker's steel door hung slightly open, warm air spilling from within. Hart signaled Keller, and together they slipped inside. The interior was dimly lit by emergency bulbs powered by a generator humming deep within the structure. Metal shelves lined the walls, stocked with tactical gear, medical supplies, old radio equipment. A hideout, a staging ground. Footprints in the dust were fresh. And then voices. Two men, low, confident, talking like they were planning something too big, too certain, too dangerous. Hart crept down the corridor, heart pounding. A doorway at the end flickered with blue light. She pressed herself to the frame and peeked inside. Vega stood in the center of the room, back turned, staring at a wall-sized map illuminated by a projector. Red pins marked major cities. Lines connected them like a web. But the man beside him was the one who made Hart's breath stop. Daniel Crest. Alive. Standing. Smirking at something Vega had said. Keller whispered, "My God!" Hart felt her pulse roar in her ears. This wasn't a chaotic prison escape anymore. This was a resurrection. Crest turned slightly, and for the first time in 18 months, Hart saw the man she'd chased across 3 states. The man who'd orchestrated operations with machine precision. The man who had died in a fire that left no identifiable remains. Because there were no remains. He'd walked out of the blaze, knowing the government would stop looking. Hart steadied her weapon, stepped into the doorway, and shouted, "Don't move." Vega didn't flinch. Crest barely turned. Instead, he smiled, that same controlled, emotionless smile that always felt like a knife pressed his spine. "Olivia," he said softly, "right on schedule. Hands where I can see them." Hart barked. "Olivia," Crest said, raising his hand slowly but confidently. "We're not your enemies. Then why break out a supermax? Why kill a guard?" Crest tilted his head. "You think we wanted him dead? The guard was going to expose the mole inside the prison who helped us. He wasn't killed by Vega." Hart blinked. "What are you talking about?" "He was killed," Crest said, "by the same people who tried to burn me alive." Keller stepped forward. "Project Helios?" Crest smiled. "We were assets as long as we were useful. When the program dissolved, they eliminated the evidence, except some of us refused to die." Hart's voice hardened. "And what is this? Revenge?" "No," Vega answered finally, turned to face her. "Retribution." His voice was calm, too calm. "Against who?" Hart demanded. Crest walked toward her slowly, hands still raised. "Against the ones who stole years of our lives and left us to rot in black sites while the world moved on." Keller cut in. "You're talking about the U.S. government." "I'm talking about a division," Crest corrected sharply. "A private wing buried in federal budgets. Helios oversight. The ones who ghosted us. The ones who ordered our erasure." Hart felt the truth worm into her chest. This wasn't a criminal plot. This was a reckoning. But Vega's next words hit harder than anything Crest had said. "We didn't break out to run," he said. "We broke out to expose them." Hart scanned the room, eyes narrowing. "Then what are all the targets? Why the cities?" Vega stepped aside, revealing the map fully. Pins weren't on civilian structures. They were on private facilities, research labs, contractor sites, security firms, places with no public record, but heavy ties to government funding. "All outposts of Helios oversight," Crest said. "The same people who turn us into weapons and then try to erase us." Keller clenched his jaw. "So what? You're forming an army?" Vega's stare was ice. "We're finishing a fight they started." Hart shook her head. "By tearing down half the country?" "No," Crest said, stepping closer. "By releasing what they buried." Before Hart could respond, Vega tapped a key on the projector console. A new image appeared. A document, government seal, classified stamped across the top. Below it, a list of names. Dead, terminated, deceased. Except Hart recognized one name. Her father's. Her breath caught. "What is this?" she whispered. Crest's voice softened. "Your father was investigating Helios oversight when you were 16. They made his death look like an accident. He wasn't the only investigator they killed." The room felt like it was closing in. Her father's death, the crash, the missing case files, the unanswered questions, all of it slammed back into her with brutal force. "I thought you deserved to know," Crest said quietly. Hart's grip tightened on her weapon, knuckles white. "Why tell me this?" she whispered. "Because," Vega answered, "Helios oversight is coming to silence all of us, including you." Keller stepped forward. "What do you want from us? Protection? Amnesty?" "Neither," Crest said. Vega nodded. "We want you to expose them." Hart's mind spun. Years of sealed files, anonymous threats, impossible roadblocks, all pointing back to this hidden division. Everything Crest said could be a manipulation, or the truth she'd been chasing her entire life. Before she could speak, a thundering boom shook the bunker. Dust rained from the ceiling. A second explosion followed, closer. Keller looked at Hart, horror dawning in his eyes. "They found us." Crest exhaled. "Helios oversight. They don't negotiate." Vega grabbed tactical gear from the shelves. "This place won't hold for long." Hart stared at Crest. "Why me?" she whispered. Crest met her eyes. "Because you're the only one who doesn't run from the truth, even when it burns." Another explosion roared. The bunker plunged into emergency red. Hart tightened her jaw. Enemies, allies, truth, lies. But one thing was certain. Whatever was coming for them, she wasn't running. Not this time. She lifted her weapon. Then let's finish what they started. As the walls shook and the darkness grew teeth, the four of them braced for a war years in the making, a war born in silence, buried in ash and resurrected in the cold Colorado night. And somewhere beneath the detonations and shattering concrete, Hart heard Cress whisper, "This is only the beginning." End of story. If you thought this was intense, you're not ready for what comes next. Subscribe so you don't miss the next case.